What's going on, everybody? You're listening to the Point2Point NHL Recap Show, Season 2, Episode 6. I'm Pascal Pryor, joined by Mark Haverlock. Mark, before we get into this episode, dude, you're looking good today. Is there something new that I'm not noticing? Or
yeah,
what?
If you guys didn't watch the last episode, Pascal and I made a bet. Pascal was at the Canadiens Flames game in Montreal. Loser of the game had to wear the opposing team's jersey, and I lost thanks to... Honestly, I'd say thanks to mostly Matt Coronado.
Matt Coronado had
Honestly, Dustin Wolf played really well as well. How was the game overall for you?
Dude,
First time in Montreal?
Not my first time in Montreal, but first time to Bell Center. Honestly, dude, I really like going to games that aren't at the Saddle Dome whenever I can. Like, the Saddle Dome's a great atmosphere and everything, but it's just like, dude, whenever I go to a game there, you can just tell by like walking around like the concourse and everything. Just the stadium's really old and outdated. So it's like, even the Bell Center, like, how old's the Bell Center? 20, 25 years old, right? Like, even
something like that, yeah.
Even the difference between the Bell Center and the Saddle Dome, like, there's a very noticeable difference. And then when you go to a rink like Little Caesars in Detroit, like, it's a massive difference, right? So It's always fun going to games that are like at different venues that you're used to and sort of getting a different experience and stuff. But dude, I love the Bell Center, man. Like, not only it was in a nice rink and everything, a nice setup, but like, dude, the fans there are like super passionate.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I know you were talking about like with Lane Hudson, whenever he has the puck, like the fans are oohing and on and stuff. And like, oh dude, like they were like, even there was points like Hudson would make a great play and I'm like, whoa, like, yeah, maybe not as loud as some of the Montreal diehards, but I'm still there, like watching a great young player play. But yeah, no, I had a great time. It was election night too, so like City was sort of buzzing with that as well. But how do you like the whole Bell experience?
Yeah, I was there last year for a Leafs-Habs game on a Saturday night. It didn't end up being like the greatest overall game, but like the atmosphere was still awesome. Like, still a bunch of Leaf fans that drove in from Toronto, right? Even for probably like cheaper tickets than they'd get there. And I love the atmosphere there. I think it's probably like the fifth time I've been. I went a couple times when I was younger, been a couple times within the past couple years. I love it, to be honest. It's probably like the most electric arena that I've been to. I haven't been to very many, to be quite honest, though. So it's like, I can't really say it's like the best or whatever. It's probably the best that I've been to, but I really like it. I was actually in Buffalo a couple days ago for Habs Sabres on Monday. That was a day game, 7-5, dude, barn burner. Shots were only 23-18. All four goalies made an appearance. Caulfield's got 2 goals, Suzuki 4 points. Honestly, like a pretty entertaining game to go to.
Yeah,
definitely back and forth. We had the lead. It was like, dude, 1-0. They scored like 30 seconds later. We made it 2-1. They scored like 30 seconds later. So it was really interesting, man. I love seeing a lot of goals when you're live.
Yeah, the best games to go to are either like high scoring games or games where like goalies are standing on their heads. For me, those are the best games to go to. Before we move on from the whole Bell Center thing, though, the other thing I really liked about the Montreal game was that the fans are still passionate despite the team being in a rebuilding mode for probably the last 3-4 seasons now, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, that's the other thing I really like. It's not like you're going to a game where it's a not the best matchup and it's sort of just like a snooze fest atmosphere. Like,
well, you also went to a game in the middle, like that was like their 4th or 5th loss in a row.
Yeah,
and they haven't been playing very good hockey, right? So like, the fact that you're saying it's still a good atmosphere and sucks, like when we're basically at our lowest point, is something that I like to see, right? Like, we're not giving up or we're going through the hard times right now, and hopefully we end up on the better half in a couple of years, to be honest. So
you guys will. I have no doubts about that. Let's move on though to an Atlantic team that is also sort of struggling right now. It's the Detroit Red Wings. They're currently second last in the Atlantic with a 7-1 record. When we were doing our season previews, Mark, this is a team we both thought, like when we talked about Detroit, Buffalo, Ottawa, that sort of secondary tier in the Atlantic, we all thought Detroit was probably going to be the playoff team out of them. No, like,
well, I think you. To be honest, I think you had them in. I
for
didn't.
Sure had them in.
I had Ottawa in. I think that was like one of our differences we had in the Atlantic.
At this point, dude, do you think it's like not too far out, but do you think at this point they don't have enough to make the playoffs?
I think that they are lacking some problems, but I think the good thing that for this team right now is they are actually getting pretty solid goaltending from Cam Talbot and Alex Lyon. Yeah. That's one thing you like to see. One guy I really love on their team that's taken that step from the AHL, Simone Edvinsson. He's looking awesome with Sider so far. Probably a guy that they can envision playing on the top pair with him. Obviously, they lost Wallman this summer. He was the guy that was playing with Sider last year. they're not really scoring a lot of goals, man. Like, a lot of their guys are struggling. Kane's not doing great. Even like Raymond, like Larkin, they're really not hitting expectations this year. I think that just because their goaltending's been pretty solid, and you see like Seider and Edvinsson kind of looking like, I'm not saying Edvinsson's a top pairing defenseman already, but like he's kind of been thrown into that role already, right? It's like they almost have pieces where it's like I can see some optimism moving forward. I'm still on the boat that they're probably not going to make the playoffs. I don't really envision them being this bad though, in accordance to like 7th in the Atlantic. How do you feel about them? Because I don't know. That's a tough spot, right? Like, they've got some talent. They're struggling. It's like, if that talent starts playing well, I can see a turnaround.
For me, the thing though is like, I think their top dogs honestly aren't playing that bad, right? Like, you look at their top scores right now. You have Raymond with 14 points and 15, DeBrincat 13 and 15, Larkin in 12 and 15, Kane with 10 and 15, right? Like, I feel like where they're really not scoring is their bottom six, dude. Like, when you look at the guys that are consistently in their bottom six, the highest scorer right now is Vladimir Tarasenko, who has 4 points.
Yeah, he's been really struggling.
Like, they're getting no production from the bottom of their lineup right now.
I just meant more like with like Raymond, DeBrincat, like they're not scoring a ton.
That is
like,
fair.
They're more like goal scorers, and that's not really what you're getting from them. But like, the depth, man, it's like, and the thing is, it's like, these are like some former first round picks too, like Joe Veleno, like Rasmussen. Like, you expect a little bit more from these guys, to be honest. Like JT Compher, they signed $5 million, $5.5 million. Like Andrew Kopp, the same thing. It's like some of these guys really aren't playing that well, and it's like, I think Tarasenko was almost brought in to replace Perron. He doesn't really play the same style as him, but like Perron put up some pretty decent production there the last couple of years. So it's like Tarasenko really needs to match that, and he's not doing that right now. I could see them making the playoffs, to be honest with you. I think they are talented enough. I just don't really know if they're going to put it all together. I will be completely honest with you, dude. I think that their coach is probably likely one of the first coaches to get fired this year if it doesn't turn around.
I would not be surprised, because like Detroit, we've been talking about them the last 3 seasons now, where it's like, okay, they've taken that step to being competitive, but they need to take that next step to making the playoffs. And every season they're just falling a little bit short. So it's like, if they fall short again this year, their time is sort of coming to an end there. But for me, like, looking right now, like, it's most likely that one team from the Atlantic's going to get in a wild card spot.
Yeah.
Maybe two. Ottawa right now, it looks like they're going to get in. And, like, the Lightning, they'll probably get in at some point. Like, it's such
honestly, the one team that I'm not really that convinced is a playoff team, just the way they've been playing. If they don't turn around, it's Boston.
Yeah.
I don't really like the way they've been playing. I could totally see them missing if they keep this up. I could kind of see Ottawa making the playoffs, and I see what you mean. Like, Tampa's probably going to make it, I think. So it's like, I see a one Atlantic wild card team, but I don't know about two right now.
Yeah.
Just the way how good Washington's playing, and then you've got like the Devils, the Rangers, the Canes, right? So it's like the Metro might have a wild card team this year too, right? So
for me, yeah, like I think Detroit, it's not their time yet. They still have some growing to do, figure out the bottom six, but I just think the teams that are ahead of them, especially in the Atlantic, they're not going to be able to overcome them by the end of the season, even if they make some acquisitions here and there. I just think those other teams in the Atlantic are better. So, man, I'm changing my take. Like, I don't think Detroit's making the playoffs anymore this year.
It's not a great start for them, man.
Yeah, not a great start at all. Let's move out to a Metro division and another team that's sort of struggling there. It's the Nashville Predators. And, dude, these guys do not look good.
Metro division.
Sorry, not the Metro, the Central. These guys do not look good, though. They're last in the Central with a 5-9-2 record, 12 points. Are you starting to worry for this team, or?
I'm a little bit concerned, man. I thought that like they would probably figure this out by now. Did you hear the Jonathan Marchessault stat about like him being on the ice at 5-on-5?
No.
So I don't know if it's changed in the last couple of days since they played again. But Marchessault this season had played 159 minutes at 5-on-5, and there wasn't a single goal for scored while he was on the ice.
That's
a crazy stat that I don't think like a lot of players at that caliber can replicate, right? So he's struggling a little bit. Obviously, like Stamkos is on pace for like 22 goals, man. Like they're getting a lot of guys that are underachieving right now. They're not really playing like the way they were last year with that same urgency. Do you think Brunette would be on the hot seat?
Without a doubt.
Like, yeah, he's barely been here, and it's like it's almost so impressive what he did last year. But it kind of almost feels like a Woodcroft situation, to be honest with you, where I feel like he could get let go soon. I honestly think by probably game 25 to 30, if they're replicating this kind of win percentage that they have, like the first 15-ish games, I think that he probably could be gone too.
Like, let's be honest when we talk about them, man. Like, when we're talking about them, we're not talking about them being, like, just, like a couple points out right now of a wild card spot. Like, we're talking about this team as being at the very bottom of the league right now.
Yeah.
Like, they're tied with the Anaheim Ducks in points. Like,
no, it's bad, man.
If things don't turn around, like, they're going to be having a top 5 pick or close to a top 5 pick at the end of the year. And when you look at free agency and the moves that Barry Trotz sort of made over the offseason, like this was a team that spent a lot of money in free agency. They had a lot of expectations coming into the season, right? Like
ton, man.
We all thought this might be a top 3, top 2 team in this division, and like they're below Chicago right now, right?
I think if they're all playing at their best, they probably are, right? And it's like there's a lot of guys that aren't really doing much, especially, to be honest with you, especially the newer guys that were signed. Like they really aren't playing well at all. Saros is kind of playing like average, I think. He hasn't been terrible, but he probably hasn't been like a top 5 to 7 goalie in the league like he has been the last couple of years. I don't really know what this team needs. I'll be completely honest with you. I've watched a couple games of them. I haven't watched a whole lot, so I can't really like fully diagnose like their problems and what they need. But from the outside looking in, it seems like a lot of guys underachieving. The one thing I will say though that I think they were hoping on that hasn't turned out, I think they were hoping Tommy Novak could be the 2C. And I just don't think it's working. I think he's more like a pretty good 3C because he's put up some pretty solid numbers the past couple years, like offensively, like 40 points in like 58 games a couple years ago. And he's young, right? Like you think maybe he could be the guy. It just doesn't seem like it, at least right now. So that's probably a hole they'd be looking to fill if they start to turn this around, and they seem like they're probably going to make the playoffs. But I guess at absolute worst, it's like, you probably fire the coach, you miss the playoffs. The good thing we talked about earlier in the year is that you have 3 first-round picks. So it's like you either try to revamp your team that way by trade, or you actually try to draft 3 players, right? So, like, I mean, the way the season's gone sucks so far, but it's like I don't think they're in like a terrible position, like franchise-wise. You know what I mean? Like, say they end up missing the playoffs. Say they're a similar trajectory to the Devils last year.
Yeah,
they missed the playoffs. I wouldn't be surprised if they turn it around next year and make the playoffs, right? Like,
yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all.
But it's like there's still a ton of hockey this season, so it's like I'm just thinking ahead. So it's like you could hope that they would be able to turn this around, almost like Edmonton did last year, right?
Honestly, and I think they can do that, man. Like they do have a fair bit of ground to make up, but they can do that. At this point, they're only 6 points behind the Colorado Avalanche for 4th in the division, right? Like you can make that up in a week,
dude. Can you tell me one player on your team where you're like, I think he's doing his part and he probably like doesn't have to be better?
There's not one guy.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. So it's like there's a lot of optimism in growing, right? It's like when you look at Pittsburgh, it's like, okay, Sid is still playing unbelievable. Like, you can't even really ask for more, and it's like it's not good enough. So that's where it's like there's zero optimism, right?
Yeah.
But like with this team, it's like every single guy on their team, even like Yossi and Saros and Forsberg, guys that have been there and have been really good, like they can be they've been better than they are right now, right? So that's where it's like, I don't know, I'm not that worried about them yet. Honestly, dude, unless they really start losing a lot of games, I probably wouldn't even say they're not going to make the playoffs until about like 30, 40 games.
Yeah,
unless they're legit like 32nd in the league. But if they're floating around even like mid 20s, like even like low 20s in accordance to like standings wise, like I'll honestly until that point be like, I think they still have a shot.
Yeah, I think I'm giving them until Christmas time.
Yeah.
Like if things are still how it is at Christmas time, for sure I'll count them out of the playoffs at that point. But
I just think they have enough talent to turn it around.
Yeah, if they're starting to turn things around by Christmas time, like give them maybe a couple weeks after that to really get going and then see what it is. But let me ask you one more question here before we move on from them. If they continue on this path, how long until Brunette gets fired, do you think? Like, what's your timeline for that?
I think that Trotz is like, I don't think he's like very patient about this. Like, I feel like he's like really pissed off. I'd say like 30 games. Like if they're not showing improvement.
30 game mark?
Yeah, like so their win percentage is like around 400 right now, maybe a bit less. Cause they're like 5-9-2, right? So they've won 5 out of 16. So yeah, geez, that's under like 33% basically. Yeah. Like if it's the same in like 10 to 15 games from now, I think he's gone.
See, honestly, dude, I think I'd give it another 10 games. If there's still the same winning percentage in 10 games, I think at that point you
so
gotta,
10 games, that's about the 26, 27 game mark,
26,
right?
27.
Do you think could you see him going before Lalonde?
Yeah.
Or do you think Lalonde could be even soon?
I could see I think Lalonde has a bit more time just because their expectations aren't as high, and when you look at the division they're in especially, it's like, well, like you got to be better.
Fair, but like you got to think, teams. Dude, like they didn't make the playoffs off of like a single goal last year in like another game. So it's like, I think that Yzerman's probably like a little bit impatient where he's like, he probably thinks they should be like at worst, like probably like 9-6 or something like that, like not 500, right? So I don't really know if Lalonde's leash is that long either.
That is fair. The other thing too is that like Stevie Y's been there longer than Trotz has, of course, right? And it's like at some point Stevie Y might have to look out for himself and be like I don't think Stevie Y's job's in jeopardy, but it's like,
no, but I do think there's a lot of talk about this plan and is it working? Yeah. And to be fair, I think that these are legitimate questions. Like, just because he built something in Tampa doesn't mean that he's doing it again with another team, right? Like it's nothing against the guy, but there are some very questionable moves that he's made as the GM, right? Like I know we're kind of tailing back to Detroit here, but it's like, dude, like the Sherratt signing, like Kopp signing, the Comfer signing, like the Ville Husso signing,
Petrie.
Like the Petrie trade. And it's like, even this offseason, you don't re-sign Gostisbehere, you replace America Gustafsson. That's not freaking working. Like, there's a lot of question marks that he's made as the GM. And there's also some good things that he's done. He took a risk on Mo Seider at number 5 overall, or 6, whatever it was. And everyone's like, who the hell is this guy? Why is he going that high? And it's a great pick, right? So, you know what? Lucas Raymond. Like, there's a lot of good things about what he's done, but there's also a lot of question marks. And if I was a Wings fan, like, I think my patience would be starting to wear out a little bit. Like, I'd start to question and be like, if he doesn't figure this out by like some point even next season, like I wouldn't be surprised if they move on.
You know what? You sort of talked me into it. I think Lalonde is on the hot seat more than Brunette now, because like Stevie Y's on the hot seat more than Trotz is. So it's like the guy that's going to be making the firing, right, is going to be the GM. Yeah. So it's like if Stevie Y is more fearful for his job, he's going to go out and fire the coach, because that's just how it works in the NHL, right? Like Barry Trotz doesn't really have any issues with, or like have to be fearful of losing his job based off how this team's performing. So it's like Brunette maybe has more of a leash due to that. Overall, though, it's going to be interesting sort of to see what these two teams do moving forward this season. Let's move out to the Pacific and talk about a team that is really down in the dumps. It is the Anaheim Ducks. They're last in the Pacific with a 5-7-2 record and 12 points. Man, we didn't expect this team to be doing a lot of things this season, but we expected them to maybe take a little bit of a step, right? Like when you're talking about teams going through rebuilds, it's all about seeing the progression. I feel like with this team, we have not seen any progression whatsoever for probably the last, like, two or three seasons now. Like, they're on pace to, again, have a top 3 pick. It's like, how are you feeling about them, though?
I think they're kind of like Montreal West right now, where they're not really playing with a lot of structure and like team defense, and they're relying on their goaltending a lot. But their thing is their goalie's playing unbelievable and keeping them in games. And to be honest with you, they're playing worse than that record. Like, Dostal has stole a couple games. Like, he was probably the Vezina winner up until about a week and a half ago, and he'd probably still be a top 3 finalist for me right now. I think he's been playing that good. I don't know with this team, man. You've got some guys that have been very underwhelming. Like, is this it for Zegras there, dude? Like,
it has to be, dude. It has to be.
But the thing is, it's like, it's not even. It felt like ever since the GM came in, right? The way he plays, it's like complete opposite of the way Zegras is. Everyone's been questioning ever since he came in. It's basically just been a ticking talk of when he's gonna go. That's the way I see it. I think that there's like 0 good offers for him right now, where they just don't feel like they can move him, and they probably are not going to get much back. But it's like, at what point do you just kind of like take the L and move on? You know what I mean? And kind of let some other guys go in there and develop. Like, he's not playing well. Honestly, dude, I thought Cutter Gauthier was going to come in and be a little bit better than he is right now. Like, he's been pretty underwhelming. There's still a couple bright spots in their team. We obviously talk about Dostal. He kind of looks like a future number 1 goalie.
Yeah.
And it seems like he could probably be a top 10 to 15 goalie in this league in the next couple seasons. On defense, honestly, I really like Zellweger's young. He's a nice little player. Minchikov hasn't really been putting up the points. He's not too bad of a player either, though. But like I don't know with this team, and I think that they're going to end up finishing like bottom 5 again. I don't really see much progression. What are your thoughts on them bringing in a new coach? I think it's kind of soon with like the roster that he has. I will say, though, he's not getting the best out of a lot of his guys. So I'm kind of in a middle spot right now, but it's also like the same situation as, okay, it's a different situation, but like him and Brunette were hired at the same time, right? So it's like we're talking about another guy who's about a year and a quarter in.
Yeah.
And it's like Anaheim doesn't have expectations, but it's also really bad. But also at the same time, it's like, I'm not calling for St. Louis' job, and they're not playing good, right? It's like, so I don't know. Like, personally, I think I would give Cronin, like, at worst to the end of the season.
I
think you got to give him time to turn this around. I think it's too short. You don't have the expectations right now, and it's like, if you're gonna bring in another guy, like, you're just gonna expect them to play harder and stuff. So, and it's not like you have the expectations to like make the playoffs like the Preds, right? So
yeah, like I'd give him to the end of the year, because it's like, when you look at this team, you want to see the progression, and there are some of these players that you're not seeing the progression, like Zegras, as you mentioned, Cutter Gauthier. You want to see a bit more from him, but there are also some players that are starting to look a bit better, like Mason McTavish, right? Like I've liked what I've seen from him so far this year. Leo Carlson, he's having a good sophomore season, right? So it's like you're seeing that progression from some of these younger players still, but there are some other players that you're not. So it's sort of like a mix of what players are going to step up, what players are not. Like with young teams, you're not going to have a season where you like 10 of the players that are below 22 on the team are all going to take steps, right? Like that's just unrealistic at the end of the day. So I think with them, you got to give them at least this season to see sort of what a full 82 games can do for some of these players, right? Because like Trevor Zegras, as you mentioned, he's probably been the worst player on this team so far.
Does he have like 6 points?
He has 3 points in 15 games.
Three.
He has a goal and 2 assists in 15 games, right? Like, he's by far been the biggest underperformer on this team, but it's like, we're 15 games in. Let's say he goes on a 20-game point streak his next 20 games, right? Like, we're going to be sitting here on January 1st being like, wow, Trevor Zegras has really turned things around. Like, he's coming back, right? Like, that looks fairly unlikely that this is going to happen for him at this point, but it's not impossible, right? So it's like, you got to give their coach a full 82 games to see what he can do with these players, because some of these players still can turn things around, right? Like Cutter Gauthier, he's 15 games into his the NHL.
I'm not saying
I'm not
I think he's going to be a legit good player, but I just say I'm just surprised that because he was kind of one of those college guys that seemed really NHL ready, right? So and he's older than like Smith and Celebrini and all those guys too, right? So I guess I'm just like I thought he'd probably have a couple goals by now and even like 6-7 points even, but it's barely been anything. The one thing I will say too about these, like there's a lot of younger guys, right? They brought in some more vets this summer, a couple more. Like, I'm not really impressed with Fabry. I'm not really impressed with Killorn.
Yep.
Honestly, like, Fowler hasn't really been too great for me. They're just not getting a lot out of their vets either. And this is why I kind of say, at least at the moment, they're like Montreal West, where it's like almost the same thing. Like Montreal's not getting a whole ton out of their vets. A couple of them have been okay and playing pretty decent, but they're just not getting a lot unless it's like the young guys performing, right? So there's a lot of things to improve on with this team. They definitely do have some good young pieces though, where it's like I'm not saying their future is bad or anything in that sorts. I do think it's probably time to move on from Zegras and kind of just figure out a good trade that would make sense for a piece you can get back that you'd like. But there's some pretty good players in this system. The one thing I honestly was really curious about was Dostal, to be honest, because he was a really good goalie in Liga, had some kind of up and down numbers in the AHL, but it seems like he's kind of coming into his own right now, man, and he's playing really solid. So, like, that's a good piece that you have as well. Like, you always need a really solid goalie, right? He's 23 years old, so hopefully they can lock him up this summer, and he's a part of their solution.
Just one more thing for you before we move on from the Ducks. We sort of talked about Trevor Zegras a bit, and you mentioned that, like, at this point, like, Anaheim just isn't going to get the return that they want for him if they trade him. If you were Anaheim, sort of a two-headed question here. First of all, if you were Anaheim, like, what would you sort of be looking for in a trade coming back for Zegras? And then also, if you were another team, so if you're like Montreal or the Leafs or the Flames, what would you like give up to see Zegras sort of come in?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, it really depends on like if Anaheim wants a piece, like in accordance to like an actual like NHL ready piece, or if they're willing to just take like kind of like a prospect or a pick, right? Like, I don't know why, but my mind goes right to, and I know it's different and he hasn't proven nearly as much as Zegras did in the past. I'm kind of going right to the Holtz trade with Vegas, with Paul Cotter. And it was like a 3rd-round pick and Paul Cotter for Holtz and Schmid. Like, I could see something like that where it's like a depth NHL piece. I'd probably say because he's proved more, that 3rd is probably like a 2nd. The thing is, it's like I can't see a team risking a 1st-round pick on him right now.
No shot.
Not
no
a fucking chance, dude. That's why I say like a 2nd and like. But the thing is, it's like Paul Cotter's kind of a nice depth player, dude.
He is.
So
he's
like
a very good depth player.
It's like I don't know, man. Like, and the thing is, Holtz is like young. That was his first NHL season last year, right? He had like 13 goals, like, but he hasn't panned out to be what he was supposed to, right? And Zegras is kind of in that situation, but he's also got like what a 60-point season under his belt as well.
Yeah,
Holtz doesn't. So I'd say something similar to that, but probably like a little bit more of a return in accordance to like with those specific teams you were asking. It's like, I don't know. Like if I'm the Habs, like I'd probably like the best piece I'd probably be willing to give up is like Newhook.
That's fair.
Like I don't know if I'd do like 1-for-1. I feel like I'd have to like think more about it, but it's like I probably wouldn't give up like Doc or like anything like that.
I would not give up Doc.
And it's not like I don't think Doc's playing very well, but it's like I just like his size and like what he brings more than Zegras does, right? But it's like Newhook, I feel like he's pretty replaceable. And I think like if you brought him in for Zegras, obviously there'd probably be some picks. I'd say probably going to Anaheim, to be honest. I'd say Zegras probably has a little bit more value, but I don't know. Like the Leafs, I just probably don't think are interested, to be on. Like I think it's a little bit too much money for them to take on. With you guys in the Flames, like I don't like. What would you be willing to give?
Like a 2nd, maybe. I don't like out of our prospects that we have right now. There aren't really any prospects that I want to give up to bring Zegras in. Like I like Coronado more. like Zary.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't be giving up Coronado.
I would not be giving up Coronado.
Yeah,
for
definitely not
Zegras
Zary.
at all.
Zary's probably better than Zegras.
Zary's without a doubt better than Zegras. I think at this point, like Honzik, I don't really think I'd want to do that. Like, dude, like Zegras is. Because the thing with Zegras is, like, dude, like, if he's performing how he is right now, he's not doing anything. Where it's like, if you get, like, Honzik performing, like, stats-wise and production-wise the way Zegras is, like, at least he's still decent, like, in his own end.
And you're also
right?
giving up, like, the way I just think about it is you're giving up a guy who's really small, and, like, Honzik's a big kind of, like, power forward guy. So it's, like, it'd be a very difficult trade.
For me, the teams that I'm, like, interested to see that if they maybe take a run at him. There are teams that are like going to make the playoffs, but aren't like real real locks or cup contenders, right? Like a team like Boston, maybe where you want to get some scoring up front. Like maybe do they risk
that's
it, right?
Pretty
like
interesting, actually.
Like a team like Carolina or the Capitals in the Metro, where it's like they're going to make the playoffs, but it's like, do they have that top end scoring to really make a run? It's like,
I don't think I actually agree with those other teams. I would say no to the Caps after bringing in Dubois and how good Strome's playing. Yeah. They also just traded for Lars Eller, so I think there's not really a lot of room there. But to be fair, he's been playing on the wing quite a bit with the Ducks.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd say the Caps, no. Those two teams are really interesting, though. I didn't really think about that. One team I kind of went right to, because they probably have assets to do it, and it's like a good guy for your future, like Columbus, maybe?
Yeah, Columbus is interesting. The only thing is they're already pretty forward heavy with their prospects, right? Like you got Lidstrom, you got Johnson, got
but Johnson's not really playing center.
That's fair.
I mean, Lindstrom, yeah, but it's like, I mean, you could move him over to the wing as well, but that was one guy that just kind of, or one team that kind of just came to my mind was Columbus. Carolina, that's an interesting one, though. Like, one team I saw that was, like, asking him about him earlier was Nashville.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they do have the assets to do it, right? Like, even if they don't give up a first, like, it's like, they could do it, and we're talking about, like, can he fill a 2C role, right? So, I don't know. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of teams that have been calling and, like, trying to buy low on him. But, like, I just don't think that their GM right now is, like, probably willing to do it. Like, he's probably getting, like, he as bad as he's playing, he is probably still getting, like, lowballed.
Yeah.
Right?
For me, the other really interesting one, and honestly, this might be my favorite one, would be the Minnesota Wild.
Okay.
Like, could you imagine the top six with Kaprizov, Boldy, Zegras, if he can turn things around there?
Yeah, they kind of lack that 2C, right?
You got Rossi still there, and he's having a good season. Like, that would be a really interesting one for me, to be honest.
Yeah, playing with Kaprizov, that actually, I think that'd be pretty cool.
I would love that. Let's move on, though, to the CHL. Massive news sort of coming out here over the past week. We saw this coming sort of for the start of the since the start of the season, pardon me, but the CHL players are now officially eligible to play NCAA hockey starting next season. We sort of knew this.
Yeah.
Couple months ago, but now it's officially official. How does this sort of change the junior hockey landscape, though, Mark?
Dude, I think that there's a lot of things that could happen now, right? Like there's so many doors that open to like different routes players can now take, like coming up from even playing minor hockey, right? Like after your minor midget AAA year, it's kind of like what do you do now? Because you're not really I guess the right word is like blocked from kind of like taking any specific career path now, if that makes any sense. I think there's a lot of questions though still that are unanswered. Like in accordance to, so now when a player gets drafted out of the CHL, he has 2 years to sign a contract. The team has 2 years to sign him to a contract. But if a player gets drafted out of, say, the USHL and they go NCAA, they have their rights for 4 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so if they're not going to change that rule, my question is, so say someone get Matt Vagradine, okay? You guys drafted him last year. You drafted him out of the CHL. He has his rights for 2 years. Well, what if after 1 or 2 years he decides I'm going NCAA? Does that eligibility now, do they hold his rights for 4 years or do they hold his rights for 2? I think that's a question they're going to have to answer, and I think they're going to have to come up with this one number for all these guys that are drafted that's going to make sense because of all these paths now, right?
Yeah.
And there's also other questions in accordance to, like, guys that have been drafted and have signed a contract in the CHL. if they've signed a professional contract, can they go to the NCAA?
I think it's. I don't know. I think that's where you
so
lose.
There's been
eligibility.
guys that have been drafted like first round last year, second round that have signed that contract, and it's like if they're not making the NHL after their 20-year-old year in the CHL, like are they still forced to go play in the AHL? Like there's a lot of questions that I think are still need to be answered, but I think this is huge for the CHL. We've already seen a couple guys that were committed to go to school in the States that have, I don't want to say decommitted, but they're going to the CHL. Like I think his name is Bryce Montgomery. He's drafted by the Hurricanes, was playing in the USHL this year for Lincoln. He just left Lincoln. Now he's playing for London. Jack Pridham.
Yep.
He was playing West Kelowna in the BCHL. He just left there and he's joining Kitchener in the OHL. I think we're going to see a lot of cases for this, and I think this is going to be a huge question for players that are kind of coming out of their minor midget year and decide what path they want to take. A lot of Canadians go down to the States, right, to play in the USHL because they want to go college.
Yep.
Do they just play in the CHL now, knowing that they can go to college after that? Like, there's a lot of questions. And the one thing I'm curious about, dude, is I don't know if it's going to happen, but a lot of people think that McKenna is leaving the CHL next year to go NCAA because he will be 18 because he's a late birthday in his year, so that's why he's a 2026. So he's in the same situation as like Hagens and Fantilli and Celebrini where he can go play NCAA.
Yeah.
So it's like he is so honestly, man, I think he might be like I think he's going to be better than Celebrini. That's my opinion. I think he's that good.
Yeah.
So it's like would it make sense for him to go? But also Medicine Hat is probably hosting the Memorial Cup next year. So it's like, what is he going to do, right? He's going to get better competition in NCAA. So it's like, does he decide to leave and go still? Or what exactly is going to happen? I don't know, but
It'll be interesting to see what he does for sure.
I love that this is now a thing, though. Like, I love that everything can change now. I think I just like it more that the CHL is going to be getting this top talent. They also changed that I think if you're 19, you can play in the AHL coming out of the CHL now. I think it's only like the year after your draft year, you have to stay in junior. But there's a lot of guys where they're going into their, like, I say D+2 year, the draft year, then there's a draft +1, that D+2 where you're in that age of being 19, 20, and you're usually not eligible to play in the A and you're not good enough for the NHL. They send you back to junior and you're almost too good for junior, right? So now those guys can go to the AHL, which I like as well. And it's like the CHL's, it's kind of like a decent trade-off, right? You're going to lose some pretty good guys, but you're probably going to be getting those guys in now that would be usually playing in like the BCHL or like the USHL or the NAL or something, right? So I think this is honestly just a win for the CHL.
I think it's a massive win for the CHL. When you look at the winners and the losers sort of with this whole thing, CHL, massive winners. The players are also the massive winners because now they don't have to make this massive decision at 15, 16 years old on whether they're going to go play in the CHL or go play in a junior A tier 2 league and keep their eligibility, right? Like as a 16-year-old, man, that's a lot of pressure to put on you. Like think about for the average person, like just like choosing what college and what program you're going to go to. That's already a stressful enough decision, and that's when you're 18 years old, right? Like these guys are doing it 2 years earlier for something that could impact if they go to the NHL or don't, or play professional hockey or don't, right? So it's like, it's going to be really good for the players. For me, when you look at like the negatives though, some leagues are really going to hurt from this, right? Like the BCHL, I think they're going to really, really hurt from this because their whole thing, it really has been like, we're the best league in Canada to play in where you can keep your NCAA eligibility, where now it's like, they're the fourth best league in Canada for that, right? Just at the flip the switch like that, right? Like USHL, they're gonna hurt a fair bit as well. The NAL, as you mentioned, I think those three leagues especially are gonna hurt, and then I also think some other leagues like the CCHL, OJHL, like Junior A Tier 2, those leagues are gonna hurt as well because like a guy like Devin Levi, right, goes and plays in the CCHL, where now it's like. He'd probably be going to the CHL, right? Playing somewhere.
He would have been in the queue. Yeah, he was drafted there.
So it's like those leagues are going to hurt because they're not going to be getting those names, and those programs aren't going to have those numbers where it's like every year we average about 5 guys going and playing NCAA Division I, right? Like those numbers for those leagues are going to go down. So that sort of sucks for them. But overall, I really like the move because it's like the biggest thing with the CHL that I've noticed over the past like 5 years is that like they're really starting to lose out on some of that top end talent, especially the Canadian top end talent, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's one thing when it's like the Luke Hughes or the Jack Hughes don't come and play in the CHL, but it's like when you have like Adam Fantilli and Owen Powers, they're not coming and playing in the CHL. And then I'm not as familiar with this year's OHL draft class, but you mentioned like there was like 4 or 5 guys that were taken in the first round.
That Valentini kid, yeah.
Right? It's like now not having that happen as much, it's going to be massive for the CHL and sort of their pull for fans because you really are watching the best junior hockey again. So I'm a big fan of the decision overall.
I think that I think personally the BCHL is going to hurt more than the USHL.
Yeah.
Because I think the USHL, a bunch of American kids like. Some might leave to come to CHL, but a lot of them will probably still want to play in the USHL because they're from there. You know what I mean? Like, so that's why I think probably the BC is going to hurt more than like the USHL and the NAL probably would. I'm really curious to see how this is going forward with some guys that are like already drafted. Do they just decide to change the development path now, knowing they can't go to school and even guys that are like probably don't even have an NHL career. I think right away, the first day this happened, Kitchener's goalie Jackson Parsons commits D1. It's like if this didn't happen, he's probably going to play U Sports next year, and now he can go to a better hockey program in the States, still have 4 more years left to play. He's going to be till he's 25 years old, you know what I mean? Get an education, probably even I don't know, I'd say probably not a full ride, but like, you know what I mean? Like, that's great for players like that now, right? Like, some of them go to the ECHL, like, they're probably not anymore, right? So,
yeah, you mentioned U Sports too. I think U Sports is going to hurt a fair bit.
1,000%. Man. Some of the best guys that played in the O and didn't get like a ECHL contract or whatever are probably going to U Sports, right? Because some of them that are drafted high in the CHL and they get like a scholarship package where they're not paying a lot for school. Like, I believe if you are drafted in the first like 2 rounds of the O. I'm not 100% sure because I know someone that was drafted in the 3rd round. If you're drafted in the first 2 rounds of the O and you sign a contract, I'm pretty sure you have like your full schooling's paid for. And if you're drafted like I think it's like rounds 3 through 6 or something, if you play like say it's like 100 games or something, then your package is paid for. So it's like a lot of these guys like may have been decently high O picks and stuff like that, and they're gonna have their schooling paid for if they go to U Sports, right? So.
Yeah, it's definitely going to hurt U Sports as well. Let's move on to the Hockey Hall of Fame. We had their most recent induction class. Former NHLers Pavel Datsyuk, Shea Weber, and Jeremy Roenick. He finally got in, which is good to see. They all got inducted, though, as part of the 2024 class. When you look ahead of next year's class, there are some notable players that are going to be on the ballot for the first time. Joe Thornton, Duncan Keith, Carey Price, Zdeno Chara, Ryan Getzlaff, Tuukka Rask, Dustin Brown, and Eric Stahl all going to be on the ballot for the first time next year. So it's like those guys already right there. That's a pretty stacked list. And then when you take into account guys that have been on the ballot for a few years now that still haven't got in, such as like McGillney or Brindamore, like next year's class is going to be fucking absolutely loaded. But like when you look at next year's class, who do you sort of think is going to be getting in?
So I don't know if you know the answer to this, but is it like, do they only take 3 players, like NHL players? 'Cause I know they take, you said before to me before the podcast, 2 women got in this year, and then is it 2 builders as well? David Poyle got in. I don't know if it's like different every year or how exactly it is, because even like when Bettman got in a couple years ago, was he just considered like a builder?
I think he
like the way like because they quote that he like built the NHL to what it is today. Like I don't really know exactly how that works, but like okay, do you want me to say if there is 3? Like because it's like
let's say if there's 3. Like basically the way I think it works is
I could probably pick 3 guys from the list that are just eligible next year.
That's what I'm saying,
not even taking into the fact of guys that are. Here's the thing: McGillney 1,000,000% should be in. I don't think he's getting in. If he hasn't been in, I don't see how he's getting in now. Brindamore, I just don't think they think he's good enough. But I think he probably should be in too.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll pick 3 guys from that list. How about that? I think the number one guy, no doubt, getting in, it would be my first pick's Duncan Keith. He's got the cups, 3 of them, gold medal. Does he have 2?
Keith?
2 gold medals? Or was he on the 2010 team?
He was on the 2010 team, yeah.
Okay, so 2 gold medals, 3 cups. Didn't he win a Conn Smythe? I don't know if he has a Norris. Who gives a shit if he has a Norris? He's in anyway. He'd be my first pick. You could call me biased, but to be completely honest with you, I think if Henrik Lundqvist is a first ballot Hall of Famer, Carey Price is. I'd probably be putting Carey Price in. Number 3.
3 for me is a toss-up between Chara and Thornton. Like, I have you where it's Keith and Price, but I go Chara, dude.
I think Chara. And it's nothing against Thornton. I just think that Chara is probably a first ballot there. But the thing is, it's like, I don't know what other guys like haven't really got in that should be in. The one other guy I'm thinking is, like, I don't know if he's going to get in, Keith Tkachuk. Like, he's got 500 goals. Like, he never won a cup, though. Like, I don't know if they just... But the thing is, it's like... Dude, I'll be honest with you, I fucking love Shea Weber, but like I'm not even really convinced he should be a Hall of Famer. Meanwhile, a first ballot. I think him being a Hall of Famer is a debate. Like I could honestly see the side where you're like, he's probably not good enough to get in. He had a really good career, but it's like, but dude, the thing is, it's like we're talking about like Hall of Fame. Like he won a gold medal, he's never won a cup, he's never won a Norris Trophy. Like he's won a leadership award. Like
here's the thing.
I don't know.
Here's the thing, dude. I don't think that guys are taking in, like, I don't think that people voting right now are taking it into account as much of like the whole Stanley Cup. Oh, he has 5 Stanley Cups. Like, I think, when it's like sort of a close one, they take that into account, right? Like we mentioned the debate between Thornton and Chara a bit. Like, we're both giving the edge to Chara because he has a bit more accolades, right? Like, I think when it comes down to that, that's where the like whole hardware debate comes in. But like I think they vote a lot more now just based on like how good was this player for their entire career. Like when you talk about Shea Weber, man, like Shea Weber, there's a 10-year span where he was a top 3 defenseman in the NHL probably, right? Like
I mean, yeah, that's probably fair, but like I'm still not really convinced that he's like a first ballot.
I also don't know how. I also don't think this year's class was honestly as strong as next year's.
Like Datsuk's by far better than both of them.
Oh, without it,
not even fucking close, dude. In my opinion. So it's like I don't know.
But so basically, the way it works is any candidate that gets 75% or higher of votes gets in. So it's like each.
So there could be a different number of players in every year.
Yeah. So it's like So it's like, dude, like. Some years.
So there could be like sorry to interrupt, but we could legit like that list of players that are first time eligible. Like we could have the 2 guys and then fucking Thornton and Chara, is what you're saying if they vote on it.
It could be that. I don't know exactly like the math, like how the mathematics behind it works, right? Because it's like every person that votes gets a certain amount of votes, right?
Yeah.
So it's like if they all get 3 votes, it's gonna be hard. Like mathematically, 4 of them. It'd be really hard for that to happen. I don't even think it could happen, to be honest, right? But like the mathematics behind it, I'm not the most sure of. But basically, if each guy gets a certain amount of vote, like each person voting gets a certain amount of votes.
Yeah, on the committee or whatever it is.
For how many? If a player receives over 75% of votes, they get in. But it's like it could happen where only like 1 or 2 guys get in a year, right? Because it's like if each person gets 2 votes, and it's like Connor McDavid and Nathan McKinnon in the same year, right? Like you'd think that every person voting are going to put their 2 votes for those 2 players.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like each year could be different, but I have a full list here of players that are eligible next year as well that have been on the ballot. So like Jason Spezza, he's eligible. I don't think he gets in next year. Brindamore. Honestly, I don't think he gets in next year as well. Patrick Ellis, he's not getting in. Gonchar, he's not getting in next year. Curtis Joseph, I don't think he's getting in next year. You got Marlowe, Miller, McGillney, Pekka Rinne, Keith Tkachuk, Justin Williams, Henrik Zetterberg. Like out of all of those guys, I don't think any of those guys are getting voted in before guys like Thornton, Chara, Price, Duncan Keith, right? I think those 4 guys that are on the ballot for the first time next year all had better careers.
The only guy I'd say like definitely should be in over them is McGillney, probably, but like it just doesn't seem like it's going to happen. The list that you said of guys that are first-time eligible, could you see every player on that list getting in eventually?
No.
Really? Who do you not think's getting in?
Dustin Brown.
I don't think so either.
I don't think Dustin Brown gets in.
You think Eric Stahl is good enough to get in?
Eric Stahl.
He does have a cup.
Again, no.
I'd say no, but he's got pretty decent numbers. I honestly, I do think he kind of had like a little bit of an underrated career. Like, I don't think people realize how good he was for a while, but I don't think that he's probably good enough to get in. Everyone else on that list, though, honestly, I could probably see getting in. Like, I think Getzlaf might be able to get in.
Getzlaf is for me, Getzlaf's 50-50.
Okay.
If he gets in or if he doesn't, like, he did have a pretty good career. But it's like, dude, it's like when you look at some of the guys like coming out of the game now, like I think we have more superstars in the game than we ever did, right? So it's like, I think it's only going to be harder and harder to get into the Hockey Hall of Fame, right? It's like, dude, like think about guys that are near the retirement. Like think about guys that are going to be retiring within the next 5 years, because guys that are retiring within the next 5 years, those are going to be the guys that Getzlaf is like going up against to get in the Hockey Hall of Fame.
So do you think Pavelski's in?
Pavelski, for me, it's a question mark. Like that's a 50-50 one as well, dude.
Okay, one guy I thought earlier today, I didn't even realize he's on the last year of his contract and he's old, could retire. Brent Burns.
Brent Burns. I don't know.
No cup. Did he get a Norris? He had that fucking one season where he had like 80 points or whatever, right?
For me, that's a hard one, dude.
I don't know. He's kind of in the same situation as like Stahl to me and like Pavelski, where it's like kind of a toss up. The one thing about Pavelski though is like no cup, but I think doesn't he have the most playoff goals in by an American ever?
Yeah.
Like that's pretty fucking insane. I don't know. He hasn't really had any awards or anything along that line, and like no cup, so I don't really know about him. Like, what about like the other guys that are coming up here? Like Fleury's gonna retire. I think he's in with the 3 cups.
Like,
I don't know if he's a first ballot, but like
Fleury's a debatable first ballot.
He's getting in.
Though. A lot of the first ballot stuff too really just depends on like who's in the class that year, right? Because it's like if Fleury goes on the ballot for the same time as like Crosby, Malk, and Ovechkin, right? It's like it's going to be harder for him to get in, right? Like you have some years where the class is a bit weaker, some years where it's a bit stronger. But for me, it's just like when I'm looking at like guys that are sort of going to be retiring over in the next 5 years in the NHL, like you have Crosby, you have Malkin, you have Ovi, right? Like those guys are for sure all first ballots. I'm trying to think of some older NHL players right now in the league.
Probably like Kopitar.
Like Kopitar, he's like he's getting in for sure,
now, right?
Drew Doughty, like there's gonna be some guys retiring here within the next 5 years that are gonna have really strong Hall of Fame.
Erik Karlsson,
like they're gonna have really strong Hall of Fame candidates or resumes, and it's like it's like are guys like Eric Stahl at some point going to be able to beat out like the Letangs, the Carlsons, the Dowdies? It's like I just don't think voters are going to be able to.
Yeah, like one guy I think that like honestly I just don't think he's getting in, but he had a very long career is like Marlowe. Like I don't really think that he had like his points per game really isn't that impressive, even though he has over 1,000 points. But he's got like 1,200 points in like 1,700 games. Like it's like. With no cup and everything like that, he was a really good player, but it's like I don't think he's like Hall of Fame material, right? Like he's got some of the records for I don't know, like some of the games played record, doesn't he? Like I fucking forget what it was when he was playing. Like he didn't have the Iron Man streak, did he?
No, I remember Phil Kessel.
Kessel, I don't even remember who was before him, but Yandel, that's who it was. I was thinking of, right? So yeah, I don't think a guy like Marlowe's in. Like Thornton, I mean. Man, he was pretty fucking dominant for a while, right? Like,
Jumbo, he has a heart.
He's getting in, dude. Like, I think he's debatable first ballot, dude. Like, we're talking about him or Chara for like as a first ballot for this year.
Jumbo's getting in for sure. Yeah. I don't know what it is, but he's getting in within the first 3 ballots that he's on.
100%. There's no one else that I can really think of that's retiring that soon, but besides some of the guys that we mentioned there.
Stammer was the one I'm sort of thinking of as well.
Yeah, if he retires after his contract's done, right?
I need to take a look at a full-on list of like players here that are like 30.
Hedman too.
Like Hedman, Stammer. Like players that are 33 and above that like are probably going to be retiring within the next like 5-ish years. We'll have to take a look at Bob, Quick.
Yeah.
That's another guy, right? So
Yeah, that's very true.
I just think the NHL right now, there's so many superstars in the league. Like all these guys are going to start retiring, and it's going to be even harder and harder for like the Brindamores, the McGillneys, the Marlows, like the guys that played sort of like in the 2000s, 2010s. I think it's going to be harder for those guys to get in when you're going up against the Crosbys, the Hedmans, the Stamkoses, the Doughties, right? Like,
Yeah.
Overall, though, I think it's going to be interesting here looking at next year's class and who gets in. But we had a good podcast today. This is going to be coming out sometime over the weekend. We'll have some more content coming out for TikTok and Instagram and sort of the social media. So stay tuned to those to keep an eye on that. But overall, I had fun today, and we'll be back for next week. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.